The marble floor of the Grand Giseon ballroom was cold enough to feel through her dress, and Maxine Beauregard noticed this in the same distant way she noticed the blood on her knuckles. 47 years on this earth, and somehow she'd ended up here, kneeling in a $1,000 emerald gown her sister had called too young for a woman your age, surrounded by men in black suits who'd stopped speaking the moment she'd slapped Senator Bae Hyun-woo across his smug, lying mouth. The crystal chandelier above her threw fractured light onto the faces watching. 200 of Seoul's most powerful people, diplomats, ministers, old money, and every single one of them was holding their breath, waiting to see what the man behind her would do. She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She could feel him, the way you feel a storm coming through the floorboards. Do-sun Yo, 38 years old, 6'2", the youngest man ever to lead the Chongye Syndicate, and the only person in this room who looked at her like she was something other than an aging mistake. His footsteps were unhurried. His voice, when it came, was low and almost amused. "Senator, you just put your hands on a woman I love. Pick your next sentence very carefully." Maxine closed her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been a divorced retail manager from Atlanta with $38 in her checking account and a sister who told her every Sunday that romance was a young woman's game. 6 months ago, she'd believed it. She didn't believe it anymore. But to understand how Maxine ended up here, kneeling on a ballroom floor with a Korean crime boss declaring war on her behalf, we need to go back. If you've ever been told you missed your window, that love is for the young, success is for the lucky, and your best years are behind you, this story is for you. If you've ever shrunk yourself to fit inside other people's idea of who you should be at your age, then sit with me. Because what happened to Maxine Beauregard between her 47th birthday and that ballroom floor in Seoul is the kind of story women don't get told often enough. This is a story about being underestimated. About a woman the world had written off, discovering she'd been reading from the wrong script her entire life, and about a man who saw her, really saw her, when everyone else had stopped looking. Before we go further, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know who's in the room with me tonight. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Maxine grew up in Forest Park, Georgia, the oldest of 3 girls in a house where her mother stretched a paycheck like it was made of taffy. She learned early that being the oldest meant being the steady one, the one who didn't cry, the one who gave up the last piece of cornbread, the new school shoes, the spot in the college her parents could only afford to send one daughter to. She gave that spot to her sister Lenora, told everyone she'd go later. She never did. Instead, she got a job at Rich's department store in downtown Atlanta when she was 19, and 28 years later she was still in retail, managing a Nordstrom in Buckhead. She was good at it. She knew every regular by name, remembered their husbands' shoe sizes, their daughters' wedding dates. She made the kind of money that paid the bills if she was careful, and she was always careful. She married Terrence at 24 because he was steady and her mother liked him. He left her at 43 for a woman named Brittany who taught spin class. He took the good car. She kept the mortgage. That should have been her wake-up call. It wasn't, because Maxine had spent so many years being the one who held things together that she didn't know how to put herself down. After the divorce, her sister Lenora moved into the spare bedroom, just for a few months, while she figured things out. 3 years later, she was still there, paying no rent, eating Maxine's groceries, and offering daily commentary on Maxine's life. "Girl, you're 46. You're not putting on lipstick for nobody. That dress is cute, but it's giving 25. We're not 25. You should be glad Terrence stayed as long as he did." Maxine laughed when Lenora said these things, the way you laugh at a paper cut so you don't have to admit it hurt. She stopped wearing the red lipstick. She stopped buying the dresses. She started ordering oversized cardigans from the clearance rack and telling herself she was being practical. Her mother had died 2 years before the divorce, and at the funeral, Lenora had pulled her aside and said, "You're the strong one. You hold us together now." And Maxine had nodded because that was the script. That had always been the script. Be the strong one. Don't need anything. Don't want anything for yourself. She sent her niece $300 a month for college expenses, even when her own car needed brakes. She loaned her cousin $4,000 for a business opportunity that never materialized and never asked for it back. She skipped her own dental appointments to pay for her sister's. On her 47th birthday, she sat alone at a wine bar in Virginia Highland because Lenora had forgotten, and the bartender, a kid who couldn't have been 23, asked if she was waiting for her daughter. Maxine smiled and said yes, because the truth was too embarrassing to say out loud. That night, she went home and stood in front of her bathroom mirror for a long time. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because she'd aged. She had gracefully, with the kind of cheekbones that get better with time, but because the woman in the mirror looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She had $38 in her checking account until Friday. She had a sister in the next room watching her television. She had a job she was good at and a life she'd never chosen. And then the phone rang. It was a number from South Korea. She almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end of the line spoke English with the careful precision of someone who'd learned it from textbooks and movies. He introduced himself as Mr. Han, calling on behalf of a private client interested in acquiring a piece of property currently in Maxine's name. Maxine almost laughed. She didn't own any property in Korea. She didn't own any property anywhere, except half of the Atlanta condo Terrence was still fighting her for. But Mr. Han was patient. He explained in that careful voice that her late mother, Adelaide Beauregard, had held title to a small commercial building in the Itaewon district of Seoul since 1987, purchased, he believed, with the assistance of a man Adelaide had known during her brief stint working at a base exchange in Yongsan. The building had been quietly generating rental income into an account Maxine had never been told existed. His client wished to purchase the building. The offer was substantial. How substantial? Maxine heard herself ask. $2.4 million, Miss Beauregard. American. She had to sit down on the edge of her bed. The room tilted. She asked him to repeat the number. He did. She told him she'd need to verify everything. She told him she'd call back. She hung up and stared at her hands for a long time. She didn't tell Lenora. She didn't know why exactly, except that something deep in her gut had whispered, "Not yet." A week later, she was on a plane to Incheon, paid for by the law firm Mr. Han had directed her to. She'd never been outside the United States. She'd never even been further west than Birmingham. She landed in Seoul wearing the most professional outfit she owned, and a knot of fear the size of a fist in her chest. The lawyer's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Gangnam. The paperwork was real. The deed was real. Her mother's signature, in handwriting Maxine would have recognized anywhere, was real. And then the door opened, and the man who walked in was not Mr. Han. He was tall, not Korean drama tall, but solidly built, with the kind of bearing that made other men in the room sit up straighter. His suit was charcoal, beautifully cut, expensive without being showy. His face was striking rather than handsome. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that catalogued her in a single sweep, a small scar at his left eyebrow that suggested a story she wasn't ready to ask about. "Miss Beauregard," he said, and his English was nearly accentless. "I apologize for the theater. My name is Do-sun Yo. I am the client." He didn't extend his hand. He gestured for her to sit, then sat across from her, and for a long moment he simply looked at her. Not the way men sometimes looked at her in Atlanta, assessing her age, her ring finger, her usefulness. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve carefully, without breaking any pieces. "I have a confession to make," he said. "I'm not interested in the building." "Then why am I here?" "Because the man who helped your mother buy that building in 1987 was my grandfather, and because for 39 years, my family has been keeping a promise to a woman named Adelaide Beauregard. A promise that requires me to find her daughter, and to tell her the truth before she signs anything." He slid a manila folder across the table. "What I'm about to show you is going to change your understanding of your own life. I need you to be ready." Maxine looked at the folder, then at him. Her heart was beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. "I've been ready for 47 years, she said. "I just didn't know what for." He almost smiled. She'd remember that almost smile later. She'd remember it for a long time. The folder contained photographs. Adelaide Beauregard at 26. Beautiful in a way Maxine had only seen in 1 or 2 pictures her mother had kept. Standing on a Seoul rooftop in 1986 with a Korean man in a tailored coat, his hand at the small of her bag, her looking up at him like he was the only person in the world. His name, Dosun said quietly, was Yeo Jin-ho. He had been Dosun's grandfather, and he had loved Adelaide Beauregard for 2 years before circumstances neither of them controlled forced them apart. She'd gone back to Georgia carrying his child and a promise that if she ever needed anything at all, the Yeo family would honor it. Forever. Maxine's hands began to shake. "What are you telling me?" Dosun's voice was steady, kind. "I'm telling you that your biological father was not the man who raised you. I'm telling you that you have a Korean grandfather who loved your mother until the day he died in 2019, and who left a substantial part of his estate in trust for the daughter he never got to meet." The room felt very far away. Maxine thought of her father, the man she'd called Daddy, who'd worked 30 years at the Ford plant and died of a heart attack when she was 22. She thought of the way her mother had cried at his funeral, longer and harder than anyone had expected. "Did he know?" she whispered. "My father. Did he know?" "He knew. He raised you anyway. According to my grandfather's letters, that was why Adelaide loved him too." Maxine put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was too far past crying. She just sat with her face in her hands while the entire architecture of her life rearranged itself. When she finally looked up, Dosun was watching her with something in his eyes she didn't have a word for. Patience, maybe, or recognition. "There's more," he said. "And this is the part that requires you to be careful." He told her then what the building in Itaewon really was, not just rental property. It sat on a corner that 3 different powerful interests had wanted for 15 years. One of those interests was a man named Bae Hyun-woo, a sitting senator with deep ties to a construction conglomerate that needed that corner for a development project worth $900 million. Bae had been pressuring the trust's administrators for years. He'd made offers, then he'd made threats. The Yeo family had refused to sell because the building wasn't theirs to sell. It was Adelaide's, and by inheritance, it was now Maxine's. "He doesn't know about you yet," Dosun said. "He thinks the building belongs to a holding company we've been operating as a placeholder. The moment your name appears on a transfer document, he will know, and he will come for you." "Come for me how?" Dosun's eyes were very dark. "Senator Bae has caused women to disappear before, quietly, legally. He has a tax investigator on retainer. He has a judge. He has reporters who write what he asks them to write. He has spent 15 years making sure the people who say no to him learn to regret it." "And you?" Maxine asked. "What do you have?" For the first time, Dosun smiled fully. It was a small, dangerous thing. "I have everything he has," he said, "and I have one thing he doesn't." "What?" "A reason to use it." He didn't propose marriage. He didn't propose anything romantic at all. What Dosun Yeo proposed, sitting across that polished mahogany table on the 42nd floor of a Gangnam Tower, was a partnership. "You can sign the building over to a charity tomorrow," he told her. "You can walk away with the $2.4 million I offered you on the phone, get on a plane and never come back. That offer is real. It will always be real. The Yeo family keeps its promises." He paused. "Or you can keep the building. Keep the inheritance my grandfather left you, which is considerably more than $2.4 million. Stand in the place your mother could not stand, and let me teach you how to make Senator Bae afraid of you." Maxine looked at him for a long time. "Why would you do that for me? You don't know me." "I know your mother kept her promise to never come back, because she understood what staying would cost her family. I know my grandfather waited for 33 years for a letter that never came. I know that when he died, the last thing he said to me was her name." Dosun's voice was very even. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because my family owes a debt, and because I do not enjoy watching men like Bae Hyun-woo win. That my motives are not pure does not make my offer dishonest. I am telling you the cost up front. What is the cost? You will be visible. You will be photographed. You will be threatened. There will be moments when you are afraid. I cannot promise you safety. I can promise you that I will not lie to you, and that I will give you the tools to fight for yourself. I will not fight your battles. I will stand behind you while you fight them. Maxine thought about Lenora in the spare bedroom, about $38 in her checking account, about the bartender who'd asked if she was waiting for her daughter, about the woman in the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning on her 47th birthday. What kind of tools? She asked. Legal, financial, strategic. I will introduce you to my attorneys, my accountants, and the security firm I retain. I will explain how the senator operates. I will translate what you need translated. You will make every decision. Every signature will be yours. If at any point you want to leave, you take the $2.4 million and you go. No retaliation. That is part of the promise. He slid a card across the table, his personal number handwritten on the bag. Take a week. Go home. Look at your life. Decide what you want it to look like at 60, at 70. Decide whether you are willing to find out who you become when no one is asking you to shrink. She went home. She told Lenora she'd been on a business trip. She didn't tell her about the inheritance. She didn't tell her about Dosun. She made coffee in the morning and went to work and watched her sister eat the leftover lasagna she'd been saving for her own lunch. And something inside Maxine that had been bending for 47 years finally, quietly, snapped. On day 5, she pulled out the manila folder Dosun had given her. She read every letter her Korean grandfather had written to her mother. She read the journal entries her mother had kept, in a handwriting Maxine had recognized but never been allowed to read. She read about a woman who'd given up the love of her life to come home and raise her child in safety, and who'd spent every birthday for 33 years writing a letter she never mailed. On day 6, she called Dosun. "I'm in," she said. "Tell me what to do." He didn't sound surprised. He didn't sound triumphant. He just said, "Then come back. We have work to do." The first thing Dosun taught her was how to say no. Not the apologetic, softened, "I'm so sorry," but version of no that Maxine had spent her life perfecting. The clean version. The version with no excuse attached, no door left open, no negotiation invited. He made her practice it in front of his attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Park Ji-yeon, who'd argued before the Korean Supreme Court 3 times. "He will offer you 40% above market value first," Park said. "When you refuse, he will offer 60. When you refuse, he will become very polite and very still, and that is when he is most dangerous. You will refuse anyway. You will use these exact words." She slid a printed page across the table. "Practice them in English. We will translate them for the record." Maxine practiced. She practiced until the words felt less like a script and more like a spine. The second thing Dosun taught her was paperwork. Not the boring kind, the lethal kind. He showed her how to file a formal claim of harassment with the Korean prosecutor's office, how to document every contact attempt, how to time a press release for maximum damage. He brought in a forensic accountant who walked her through Senator Bay's financial structure, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the construction kickbacks that had paid for his daughter's apartment in Cheongdam. None of it was admissible yet. All of it was useful. The third thing he taught her was how to walk into a room. Shoulders down, chin level. You do not enter a room asking permission. You enter as though the room has been waiting for you. He demonstrated, walking the length of his office. Then he watched her try. Then he made her try again. "You're still apologizing with your body, Ms. Beauregard." "It's Maxine, and I've been apologizing with my body for 47 years. Give me a minute." He almost smiled at that. He almost smiled at a lot of the things she said in those first 3 weeks. She started to count them. She rented an apartment in Yongsan with money from the trust. She enrolled in an intensive Korean language program, 2 hours a day, every day. She bought clothes, real ones, not clearance rack ones. She bought a tube of red lipstick at a department store counter in Myeongdong and put it on in the cab back to her apartment and almost wept. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor. Hit that like button and share this with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. Now, back to Maxine. When the first contact came, it was almost gentle. A man in a beautiful suit appeared at her door with a bouquet of white peonies and an envelope containing an offer for the building, $3.1 million, significantly above market. Maxine refused. She used the exact words Park had given her. The second offer came 2 days later, $4.8 million. With it came a quiet suggestion that perhaps Ms. Beauregard's sister Lenora, currently residing in Atlanta, might benefit from a small contribution to her financial well-being. It was the mention of Lenora that did it, not because Maxine was afraid for her sister, because Senator Bay had assumed Maxine could be reached through the people who had taken her for granted her entire life. She refused again. And then she did something that wasn't in the script. She filed criminal harassment charges, personally, with Park beside her translating, in a prosecutor's office in Central Seoul, on a Tuesday morning in November, with 3 different cameras filming because Dosen had quietly tipped off 3 different journalists. Senator Bay's name appeared in the Hankyoreh the next morning, page 3, a small article, carefully worded. But it was there. Bay's people called Dosen within the hour. Dosen didn't take the call. He texted Maxine instead. "He's afraid now. Stay where you are. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know." She didn't. She sat in her Yongsan apartment with her red lipstick on, and a cup of barley tea cooling on the windowsill, and for the first time in her adult life, she felt like the protagonist of her own story, instead of the supporting cast in everyone else's. The civil suit was Park's idea. The criminal charges were the appetizer. The civil suit was the main course. It took 4 months to bring to court. 4 months of depositions, of forensic accountants tracing money, of journalists Maxine had never met, asking her careful questions in cafes she'd never been to. 4 months of being followed sometimes, of finding her mail tampered with twice, of one night when someone tried the lock on her apartment door, and Dosen's security team had a car downstairs within 90 seconds. She didn't sleep well during those months. But she slept better than she had at 46. The hearing was held in a courtroom in Seoul on a Thursday in March. Senator Bay arrived with 7 attorneys. Maxine arrived with Park and a translator. Dosen did not attend. He'd told her he wouldn't. "This is your room," he'd said. "I will be the last person in it." The senator's lawyers were good. They were very good. They argued that the harassment claims were fabricated, that the property dispute was a civil matter being inflated by a foreign opportunist, that Ms. Beauregard's American citizenship and recent arrival in the country suggested motives that the court should examine carefully. Park let them talk. She let them talk for almost 2 hours. Then she introduced the evidence, bank records. 3 of them, from accounts in the Cayman Islands and Singapore, traced back through 6 shell companies to a man who'd worked as Senator Bay's chief of staff for 11 years. Payments to the senator's daughter's apartment, payments to a construction firm that had won 3 no-bid contracts, photographs, God, the photographs, of the senator meeting in a private dining room with the same chief of staff and a 3rd man whose face was very familiar to the Korean prosecutor's office. The courtroom went very quiet. Maxine watched Senator Bay's face. She watched it the way Dosen had taught her to watch it, without expression, without satisfaction, without anything except patience. He looked at her once, just once, and in that look she saw what Dosen had warned her about, the still, polite hatred of a man who had not been told no in 20 years. She did not look away. The judge ordered the case forwarded to the criminal prosecutor's office for additional investigation. The civil claim was upheld. Senator Bay was ordered to pay damages of 300 million won and to cease all contact with Ms. Beauregard, her family members, and any holdings associated with her name. It wasn't prison, not yet. But it was the first crack in 15 years of unchallenged power, and it had been opened on the record by a 47-year-old black woman from Forest Park, Georgia, who had decided she was done apologizing. Outside the courthouse, the journalists were waiting. Maxine stopped on the top step. She had prepared remarks. She didn't use them. "My mother taught me," she said in slow, careful Korean she had practiced for a week, that a woman's worth is not what she gives away. It is what she refuses to lose. Then she switched to English. Senator Bay thought I would be easier to break than the people who came before me. He was wrong. He was wrong about me. And he was wrong about every woman he assumed could be intimidated into silence. I am not the last one he will hear from. She walked down the steps. Park walked beside her. The cameras followed. In a black car across the street, Do-seung-yeol watched her go, and for the first time in 15 years, he allowed himself to smile in public. Lenora arrived in Seoul 10 days later. She came uninvited, on a ticket Maxine hadn't paid for, with 2 suitcases and a story about how worried she'd been when she'd seen her sister on CNN. She showed up at Maxine's apartment in Yongsan at 9 on a Saturday morning, and the doorman called up, and Maxine took a long, slow breath and said, "Send her up." Lenora walked in wearing the exhausted expression of a woman who'd flown coach across the Pacific to deliver a difficult speech. She set her suitcases down, looked around the apartment, the real furniture, the fresh peonies on the table, the view of Namsan Tower from the living room window, and her face did a complicated thing. "Girl," she said, "what are you doing?" "I live here now." "You live here." Lenora sat down on the couch without being invited. "You live in Korea. You're 47 years old, and you've decided to start over in a country where you don't speak the language, with a man you've known for 6 months who, from what I can find online, is some kind of gangster. He's a businessman. Maxine. He's a businessman," Maxine said again evenly. "And what I'm doing is none of your concern." Lenora's eyes went hard. "None of my concern. None of my... I'm your sister. I came across the world because I'm worried about you. Mama would be rolling in her grave." "Mama," Maxine said quietly, "kept a journal for 33 years about the man she loved in Seoul and couldn't be with. Mama left me the building that's been paying for your spare bedroom for the last 3 years. Don't tell me what Mama would say. You don't know what Mama would say." The silence that followed was the kind that rearranges furniture. Lenora's voice, when it came back, was smaller. "You're not yourself." "I am, though. For the first time in my life, I am exactly myself. You just don't recognize her." "What about me? What about you?" "What am I supposed to do, Maxine? You were taking care of me." And there it was, not concern, not love, the clean, honest center of the thing. Maxine sat down across from her sister, and she did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She used the no that Park had taught her in November, the clean version, the version with no door left open. "You're going to find a job," she said. "You're going to find an apartment. You're going to figure out how to be a grown woman, the way grown women do. I love you. I will always love you. But I am not your mother. I have never been your mother, and I am done auditioning for the role." Lenora stared at her. "And the inheritance?" "Is mine," Maxine said. "All of it. I will help you when you genuinely need help. I will not subsidize you avoiding your own life. That is not love. That is something I mistook for love for a very long time, and I am not making that mistake anymore." Lenora left the next morning. She didn't say goodbye properly. Maxine paid for her hotel and her flight home and her cab to the airport, and then she closed the apartment door and stood in the middle of her living room and let herself cry for the first time in months. Then she washed her face, put on the red lipstick, and went to lunch with a woman who, 6 months ago, she would not have believed she could become. The offer from the Seoul branch of Callaway International came through Park's network, but Park made very clear it was Maxine's qualifications that had earned it. 28 years of retail management experience, a track record of turning around 3 different underperforming stores in the Atlanta metro area, fluent enough Korean now to hold a business meeting, and, Park had added with a small smile, a recent reputation for being a woman who did not back down. The position was Regional Director of Operations East Asia, 6 figures, a team of 42, an office on the 18th floor of a building in Yunggu with windows that faced the river, Maxine read the offer letter 3 times. Then she went into the bathroom of her apartment, looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and said out loud in her own voice with no one else listening, "You earned this. You earned every single piece of this." The woman in the mirror looked back at her. She didn't look tired anymore. She didn't tell Dosen about the offer for 2 days. Not because she didn't want him to know. She did. But because she wanted to be the one to make the decision. Entirely. Without consultation. Without his weight on the scale. She accepted on a Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. She told Dosen on Wednesday evening, over a dinner at a small restaurant in Bukchon, that he'd been wanting her to try for weeks. She told him casually, almost as an afterthought, because the truth was that she didn't need his approval for this. She just wanted his company. He put his chopsticks down, looked at her, and then he said quietly, "I'm proud of you, Maxine. But more importantly, are you proud of yourself?" She didn't have to think about the answer. "Yes," she said, "I am." It was the first time in her adult life she had answered that question with a simple yes. She started the job in May. By August, she'd restructured 2 underperforming locations. By October, she'd been profiled in a Korean business magazine. A small piece in the back of the issue, but it was there, with her photograph and her name spelled correctly, and 3 paragraphs about her management philosophy that did not once mention her age, her marital status, or the man she was occasionally seen having dinner with. She framed the magazine page. She hung it in her apartment, above the red lipstick on her vanity. It was hers, all of it. She had built it. Dosen had not asked her to be his anything. He had not asked her to define what they were. For 7 months, he had simply shown up. At the courthouse, at the language school graduation she hadn't told him about, but somehow he'd known, at the hospital that morning in July, when she'd had food poisoning and he'd brought her white rice porridge, and sat in the chair beside her bed, reading reports on his laptop until she'd fallen back asleep. He had let her become someone before he ever asked her to be anyone to him. It was Maxine who finally said it, on a cold night in November, walking back from a small wine bar in Hanam-dong. She'd had 2 glasses of something French, and she was wearing a coat that fit her properly, and her shoes were the kind of shoes a woman wears when she has decided she is worth shoes like these. "Dosen." "I want you to know something." He stopped walking, looked at her. "I am not afraid of you," she said. "I am not afraid of what you do, or who you are, or what people say about you. I am not afraid of being seen with you, or of what this looks like from the outside. But I need you to understand. I am not with you because I need you. I'm with you because I choose you. And I will only stay as long as that is true on both sides. If it ever stops being true for you, you will tell me, and I will let you go without a fight. Do we have an agreement?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Maxine." "Yes." "I have been waiting for you to say something like that for 4 months. Why didn't you say it first?" "Because you needed to be the one to say it. Because everything else in your life was someone telling you what you were to them. I was not going to be one more." She laughed, actually laughed, the kind of laugh she hadn't laughed since she was 22. He reached for her hand, not possessively, just held it. The way 2 people hold hands when neither of them is trying to keep the other from leaving. "There's a charity gala in 2 weeks, he said, "at the Grand Joséon. The senator will be there, so will half of his backers." "Are you asking me to come with you?" "I am asking you," Dosen said. "If you would like to walk into a room with me on my arm, in front of every person who has spent 15 years pretending you do not exist." Maxine thought about the woman in the bathroom mirror on her 47th birthday. "Yes," she said, "I would like that very much." She didn't get a fairy tale. Maxine Beauregard did not ride off into the sunset on the back of a Korean crime boss's motorcycle, and the senator did not go to prison the next morning, and her sister did not call her crying with a perfect apology, and her life did not become uncomplicated. What she got was a 48th birthday she planned herself, at a restaurant she'd chosen, with friends she'd made on her own, in a city she'd learned to navigate with her own 2 feet. What she got was a man across the table from her who looked at her the way a man looks at a person he respects. What she got was the slow, daily knowledge that she had built something nobody could take from her, not because nobody would try, but because she finally understood she was capable of defending it. She got herself back, the version of herself who had been waiting, underneath 47 years of being the strong one, for someone to finally treat her like she was worth being soft with. If you've ever been told your best years are behind you, let Maxine's story be your reminder. The world is wrong about your timeline. It has always been wrong. Your story is not finished because someone with a smaller imagination decided it should be. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the lie about your age, your worth, or your timing that you're ready to stop believing? Share this video with a woman in your life who needs permission to start over. And subscribe, because there are more stories like Maxine's coming, and you deserve to hear every single one of them. She didn't get a fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got herself back.